right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 142. So, oh man, yesterday was really awesome for especially those that showed up for the best year ever. Let's hope that 2023 and let's make it the best year ever. But it was so good to see Bruce Anderson in person. That was awesome. And it was really great. It was my fourth time through it. And each time I'm like, man, this is so good. And it's fun to look back on the previous years, what we said we wanted to see happen and goals and all that kind of stuff. And we've got a lot to talk about today. We've got some polls. We've got a survey. I mean, we're just loaded for bear today. So I'm super excited about that. And I know that Adam wants to talk about, the scuttlebutt about, hey, well, now that we've got a new Speaker of the House and they're going to repeal all the 87,000 IRS agents and other things. I know he's got some things, ideas about that. Jack has a whole bunch of ideas. There are a lot of great things to talk about, but the one thing that we got to talk about is this is the right here, man. These Kansas State Wildcats, 15-1. They are the real deal in basketball, man. So even maybe the Dean Dome crowd will be jealous of them, but it's early in the season. So you guys know what the drill is. Harass us on the chat, Q&A. You can hit us up with questions, but we're going to talk about workforce stuff that's going on in the workforce. What do we do to prepare if this recession is looming? It's so interesting to hear the gamut of, the correspondents and the pundits, etc. But I think, and Adam has some math questions, so he always likes that. That's always fun. So let's start with Jack, though, because you've got some kind of current affairs, and then we'll go into some of the, hey, what's brewing out there. So why don't you do that, and then we'll go to the math questions with Rain Man.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. You may have heard that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has come up with an idea. I put this in the category of dumb ideas by bureaucrats, but others feel differently about that, which is...
Are there any smart ideas by bureaucrats? Just asking.
I think it's not that they're smart ideas, it's that the end results sometimes are beneficial unintentionally. So maybe that's the way of putting it. So what has happened after New Year's, Happy New Year's to everyone, is that the FTC has said, we think that the mere existence of non-competes is bad for the economy and bad for workers. So we, the Federal Trade Commission, are going to use our powers to push forth a recommendation that there should be a ban on the use of non-competes in any scenario. That would include not just the employment scenario, but also in transactions of buying and selling businesses and those kind of things. And you may be hearing the sarcasm in my voice as to that, because I understand that it has a negative impact on individuals being able to pursue livelihood in certain circumstances. And from my perspective, non-competes were never really meant to ban people from doing that. It is meant to ban people that and I use this term all the time, benching people. You're benching people. They have received a benefit, whether it is that they're working for a company, or it is that they've received some knowledge and training, or in a sale transaction that they are about to get paid a ton of money and they should not be able to go open up a shop next door. There has been, at least in my mind and in the legal world, a differentiation or difference between a non-compete and its enforceability in the concept of just general employment versus that being in a asset sale or stock sale, et cetera. And so my comment about getting paid a ton of money to be benched is legitimate, but this rule would potentially abolish a lot of that or attempt to abolish that. But and if it does pass, I don't think that part will pass. The other part is maybe a ban on the minimum wage workers or those kind of things. When you start getting into management and that level, there is a legitimate business interest in having those people not be able to compete in your backyard. And depending on what the position is, if it's a national position, then there should be the ability to say, yeah, you cannot go work for a competitor in that same position where you have influence over the entire United States. So a core concept to kind of take a step back in non-competes is really two components. It's geography and time. And theoretically, the larger the geography, the smaller in time, the larger time, smaller geography, but they're not counterweights to each other necessarily. And so it really focuses on what is the legitimate business interest of the business. And so I pulled up the fact sheet for the FTC proposal, which is basically their reasoning behind putting this out there. And I'll just read you kind of the titles of the various paragraphs and maybe get into it just a little bit. But non-compete clauses significantly reduce workers' wages. Well, so when employers use non-compete clauses to restrict workers, they have the power to suppress wages and avoid having to compete to attract workers. Yeah, well, really, who cares about the investment that's made in that person to attract them in the first place? You know, that really doesn't matter, apparently. Non-compete clauses stifle new business and new ideas. Existing evidence shows that non-compete clauses hinder innovation in several ways, from preventing would-be entrepreneurs from forming new businesses to inhibit workers from bringing innovative ideas to new companies. So I guess it's okay that you learned the trade from us, you learned our technology, you figured out how to make it better, and you can go take whatever it is and go bring it over there and sell it on your own, but that's okay. So non-compete clauses can exploit workers and hinder economic liberty. Employees have less bargaining power than their employer, so it's a take it or leave it. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Do not sign up to be an employee if you don't like the terms of your employment. You don't like what you're getting paid. You don't like what your duties are. You don't like the fact that you cannot go work for a competitor and steal that company's ideas and bring them elsewhere. Do not sign on the dotted line of your employment agreement. I mean, shocker, right? Okay. Employers have other ways to protect trade secrets and other value investments that are significantly less harmful to workers and consumers. I guess that assumes that maybe we have the ability to extract stuff out of people's heads, kind of along the lines in Harry Potter with those little threads that magically get pulled out. Or even, wasn't there a Batman movie with an older one where they put this thing on the people's head and they could extract
Jim
their
Carrey
ideas?
played the Riddler in that
Yes.
one. It was with Val Kilmer playing Batman.
There you go. There
Batman
you go.
Forever. Where's my Starbucks card?
See, that would have been a good giveaway for today.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You don't qualify to win. You're disqualified. So, all right. Let's see. And so really, and then it goes through maybe some statistics as to why the proposed rule on non-competes is beneficial to the economy. And then they give some examples, which it's, woe is me. Let me find a short one. Okay. Keith, a factory manager for a textile company, saw his paycheck dry up after the 28 financial crisis. A rival textile company offered him a better job and a big raise. A non-compete blocked him from taking it. Keith fought the non-compete, but after the 3-year legal battle wiped out all of his savings. Okay. Now, the fact that it's a factory manager, I'm kind of sympathetic for that because I think that is not upper management, but let's change the scenario to upper management. I'm not sorry for this person. I mean, you know what you're getting into. You decided that you were correct, or you had some people, maybe bad lawyering, that said, hey, yeah, you got a slam dunk case and you spent 3 years fighting something and you lost. And I'm supposed to feel bad about that. Again, I am empathetic, but to a certain extent. freedom of contract and making choices and then having to live with those choices is a part of our economy and capitalism and everything else. So anyway, the end of the story, the summary of the story is that this probably won't go anywhere. There's enough trade groups that are going to fight this. There's enough people in Congress right now that are like, no way. And then that isn't even getting into the whether or not the FTC even has the ability to do this, or have they overstepped the regulatory power. So anyway, long-winded way of saying a lot of nothing about nothing. But in case you were wondering, because there seems to be a big hubbub about it over the past week or so.
Yeah, no, that's a great soapbox you're on there, Jack. Remind me again about your non-compete with Shoemaker. Oh yeah, that's right, because they don't have them for attorneys. Come on, man. You knew that was coming. All the profession doesn't have a non-compete by law. Just put it out there.
That is true. We are constrained by our own morality and ethics. Yes.
Just find
doctors too. Well, throw doctors in there too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just find that really funny. Anywho.
Yeah, it was preaching pretty good too, but
yeah, no, but I generally do agree with it. And I understand what they're saying with the whole attorney thing. It's like, look, what's in the best interest of the client? Is it to force them to work with somebody that they don't trust? Or so I get that whole part of it.
all right, so we got a couple things that came in on Q&A, even though these should be on the chat, Joe and Robert. You should know better. But so Joe says, sorry, but I'm anti non-competes and the way that they're selectively used and enforced. Yeah, okay, got it. And then Robert,
Yeah.
he's throwing something in the punch bowl on this one. So he says, speaking of banning gas stoves will cause a revolt of greater than what we saw on January 6th. Well, yeah, probably better than what we're seeing in Brazil right now. But it will cause revolt far greater. Let's face the real fact about global warming. The root cause of the problem is that human population has just grown far too fast. We're at 3.5 billion 50 years ago. Now we're at 8. That's the problem. We need to stop having children, not ban gas stoves. Okay, well, China's been trying that. Would love to hear Adam's opinion on this, and maybe Jack can speak to the legal side of stopping population growth. I think I could send you to some chat rooms where they are convinced that Bill Gates is all about that. So I don't know.
I mean, that's I don't know how we devolved the webinar into this, but if I could address the comment, because it's actually, as much as I loved Infinity War, there, that is kind of like, as horrible as it sounds, that's kind of a true statement, in the sense that as awful as things were, or as much as you may or may not agree with the one-child policy in China that was just raised to 2, it was for this reason, that they were concerned about their own population growth and ability to keep up with their own resources. And India is about to pass them. India did not have a population control, is about to surpass them as the most populous country. And the challenge that India has is that most of that population growth is occurring in very fact check me on my word, Jack, but in very misogynistic, poverty-stricken areas of their culture, where it's like, how many kids are you going to have? However many my husband tells me that I'm going to have. So you have women have families with like 7, 8, 10 kids. If you just follow like, where is population growth going out of the country, it's in areas that are underdeveloped. And then you kind of make the argument, well, is that really fair that the rich nations get to tell the poor nations how many kids they can have, when they've already got it? It is a huge ethical problem that doesn't change the fact that there's too many people.
Yeah, and then right, and then it is, and I think that it's easy to say, okay, let's pass a rule that says there's a cap. The problem is what you do when anyone exceeds the cap, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, and even, and obviously I don't agree with any of that. I understand as you do, the economics of it and the reasons for it, but I don't agree with it, right? Okay. So from a purely objective standpoint, but I mean, when you throw in morality and ethics and all those things, really the problem is on the backside of the enforcement. What do you do? And not only with respect to the new life, but if you say, okay, fine, now we're going to impose a huge penalty on you for for exceeding, then it becomes an elitist thing, the haves and have nots. Those that can afford the fee for having more than one or two children are going to do that. And then you have disproportionality and inequality. And, there's a lot of nations that probably wouldn't have an issue with that at all. But so anyway, I think that is from an objective standpoint, that is the issue, which is what do you do when that rule is not followed?
So here's a math question for you, Adam, and it's actually from Papa Joe. So this was, put your thinking cap on this one. Does a reduction of population reduce the impact of non-competes?
No.
In theory, yes. The smaller the pool, but I don't know. I mean, that's a philosophy question.
Yeah, we'll save that for the session on psychology and sociology and all that stuff. So yes.
Oh gosh. So Adam, did you want to get into any of your math questions?
Yeah, I'll go over that in a second, but a couple of things that I'd hit on in terms of my own version of current events. Gary hit on it. The repeal of the 87,000, IRS workers. I'm going to continue on the rant of, first off, that's interesting, but good luck finding them in the first place. In terms of like actually finding 87,000 bodies who are willing to actually work in the tax profession. Because if you found that magic freaking tree, could you let us know where it's at?
Yeah.
But independent of that, I just want to, if people could put on their empathetic hat for just one small moment, let me again reminder what it's like to call the IRS these days. If you don't call at 7 a.m., then this is on my special bat line, by the way, for CPAs. If you don't call at 7 a.m., you can't even be put on hold. They just say you'll never get through. So goodbye. So they are woefully undermanned. Their IT systems were written in the 50s. That's what's processing your tax return right now, is a system built in the 50s. It's sort of like the same problem we got with the FAA. It's just that's a little more public facing than the colossal failures that you see with the IRS system. So it's just, I'll eat my shoe that I'm currently wearing if we find that our client base suffers because of 87,000 workers being hired. There's just a massive backlog that needs to get churned through. So we have clients now that, had to have their returns amended, IRS is so slow in processing the returns. They're getting notices for stuff that they don't know. You can't get anybody on the phone to resolve it. It's a freaking nightmare. Soapbox complete on that. So if anybody says, we're getting rid of that because we're protecting small businesses, no, actually that's bullshit. Anyway, so the other thing that I want to hit on too, because come up again, remember Adam is a libertarian. I want to say that over and over again. Adam is a libertarian.
That's like saying, with all due respect for the rest of us.
With all due respect to the rest of you idiots. They keep on, we're going after entitlements next. This is just a reminder to everybody on the call that maybe listen to this after the fact, that when people talk about entitlements, what they're talking about is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So, retirement benefits to elderly people, or survivor benefits, insurance for the old folks, and insurance for people that otherwise can't afford it, or disadvantaged, disabled, whatever it is. And that's your buckets of entitlements. So they tell you, we're cutting those, freezing them, whatever they're going to do. I mean, because you've never actually seen a proposal out of anybody about what they're actually going to do with these benefits. The problem with that, like, if you want to start talking about, insurrections, is that, remember that roughly 30 some odd % of the government's tax receipts, so, which in real numbers is $1.5 trillion. Remember that number, Jack, $1.5 trillion of the government's gross receipts come from our taxes that are associated with Social Security and Medicare. So you got your income tax, that's one thing. And then everybody remembers there's those payroll taxes that sit on top of that. That represents $1.5 trillion of receipts that comes in. So I'm funding my benefit, basically. I'm funding my own Social Security, right? Well, the outflows associated with all these boogeyman entitlements is about $2.2 trillion. So 1.5 does not equal 2.2. That's clearly a problem. But remember, Joe, it's all those freaking baby boomers that have outpaced me and Jack's generation of population. It's like, so we had a going back to population, we had a reverse population curve. So there are more people drawing on Social Security than there are people currently funding, which is the explanation for a substantial component of the gap that currently exists in terms of inflows versus outflows, which is why they talk about, look, we may actually just have to change the rate a little bit. Maybe they monkey with, I mean, every year that goes by, I'm going to get grandfathered in, but when they talk about monkey with people's retirement age a little bit, those are all acceptable solutions to close a donut hole, but you're really only talking about a $700,000 gap between the money they take out of my paycheck and the money that they spend. And a good bit of that gap is associated with there being more retirees than there are payers into the system, not deadbeats that are just getting handouts. So my only point in saying that is that, regardless of how you may or may not feel about whether or not the government should be in social programming or not, there's not a lot of money there to be had. I mean, every dollar counts, but there's just not a big pot of money there. And then B, thanks, Joe. That's right. And then B, going back to the insurrection, I don't know. I mean, I don't own a gun, but I would be an insurrectionist if you told me that, we're totally cutting benefits. This is bullshit. Getting rid of them. No, we're not going to change that tax. Because it's meant to be kind of neutral, in the sense that, like, you can't cut the benefit, but then not do something with the tax associated with it. And that's been the eternal problem that none of these jokers have ever figured out how to do, which is why it's called the, what, Gary? Third rail politics. So we're going to, beat the gong, and then some person like myself reminds them, hey, by the way, that we actually collect taxes to fund all that stuff that's designed for a specific purpose. So if you reduce the benefit, then perhaps you're going to have a real problem with still collecting the same amount in the tax. And they go, oh, I didn't know that. Anyway, soapbox complete, Gary. So I'm going to share my screen.
All right, share away.
All right, so you guys should be able to see some chicken scratch now. Is that correct,
man.
Gary? All right.
Yeah,
Chickens. Yep.
Einstein has entered the room.
Yeah, that's right. So, I guess what I wanted to get an example of, because we've been talking a lot about retention, inflation, how do you keep employees, you got to pay them more, we've all, We wish for the good old days, the 90s, when it was an employer's market. All that stuff, right? Good, recession, bad for business, but good for employee morale. They appreciate me a little bit more. I'm gonna burn in hell for all this, aren't I, Gary? He's like, your culture meter is going down in flames, buddy. Down in flames. But so I just wanted to give people an example of like what it really means, if you're gonna do a raise adjustment, and kind of how you calculate what you need to do to cover, either through price increases or sales volume increases to make up for that. Because we've had a lot of dialogue around inflation, what happens, giving people raises, you're gonna have to adjust prices, I wanted to show like a real live problem of what that actually means. So in this scenario, we've got, and I should be able to drop. Oh, I've got my rate. I'm not gonna mess with it. So we've got a company that's got sales of $1 million, cost of goods sold is $600,000, which breaks down equally into material of 300 grand, labor 300 grand. Someone's gonna laugh and say, "Oh, you just made this example simple for the math." It's like, this actually is not far off like a typical company that has sales and cost of goods sold in terms of the breakdown. So you got a gross profit of 400 grand. Selling general administrative expenses of $250,000 that breaks into labor of 200, and then everything else is 50 grand. So you got a bottom line profit of 150 grand. So sales of $1 million, bottom line profit of 150 grand. Doing fairly well. We'd like to see this guy up at 20%, but currently at 15%, so not bad. So you got to get into some math to figure out, okay, well, what, like if I'm going to give people 10% raises, because that's kind of the inflation gun that I have to my head right now, to keep everybody intact, like what do I need to do, to adjust for that? Well, the first thing, since you've got labor in your cost of goods sold and down below in SG&A, you got to lump those together and kind of figure out, well, what's that as a percentage of gross profit? If I adjust it. So that's what this first equation is where it says labor equals GP plus GP labor equals your adjusted gross profit. What you find is that labor, if you add up your 300 grand plus 500 grand divided by $700,000, which would be your adjusted gross profit if you took the labor out of it, your labor is 71.4% of your gross profit. Why do we like looking at gross profit as the measurement point versus sales? It's because, it's the truest measure of like, after you pay other people for the widget, what do you got left to work with? But if you got labor up in gross profit, you got to adjust back for that. Because even though like labor and gross profit is variable, kind of not really, like if you're having people show up, but they only work at 50%, you still paid them for a full day. So it's not truly variable, like I only have to buy 20 pens, type of thing. So Jack's looking at me concerned. He's like, I did not take accounting. I didn't want to be a manager of accounting. I went to law school. So the way that you figure that out is to give a 10% raise to keep profit constant. Then you take the raise amount divided by your gross profit percentage adjusted, which in this case is 70%. It means a $50,000 raise because I'm doing 10%, 300 grand my worker labor, 200 grand my management labor, divided by 0.7 means a $71,000 increase of some sort is what's going to be required for me to stay flat. So I've got to do a 10% raise in this scenario, I got to grow by a little over 7% to make that happen. Down below is just the math to make this work. Show, okay, my new sales are 107,400. Cost of goods sold, because I sold a little bit more, 321,420. Labor's now 330 to incorporate the 10% raise, new gross profit, raise out of my SG&A people, and I land back at the same 150 grand number. My point in saying all this is like, you know, if you don't do this, then it just means that any raises that you're doing is coming out of profit. Now, can you get away with doing all this and passing it on your customer? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, probably depends, maybe some people are going to have to absorb some of this. Maybe some people, kind of say, but we'll make it up on volume or we'll make it up on efficiency. Only thing you got to do there is that if your plan is we're going to make it up on efficiency, what are you actually going to do different to make it up on efficiency? Because like in Jack and I's world, using that as an example, well, I know we got some capacity around here somewhere. We'll make it up on efficiency. Jack, what happens when you go to the paralegal who's been used to dealing with 50 client matters and you say, here's your raise. I now need you to deal with 75 client matters. Don't worry, you've got the time available.
Are you talking about the look that I get back from them or the actual verbal reaction that hopefully is not immediate, but it's like, yeah. And, does the money correspond to the additional effort that I have to put in, essentially?
Yeah. So explaining to somebody that they're screwing off too much never works out.
But I like the way you said it. It's like, we believe you have the additional capacity rather than you've been spending too much time surfing on Google. So
yeah. Or hey, we're going to change a few things, going to drive some efficiencies. Because people generally, are, people generally feel busy. I mean, are there some people who are probably screwing off at home right now? Absolutely. But in general, even when they were, this problem wasn't any different when you could actually lay eyes on them, because I can waste time just as good at the office as I can at home. I can also expand my workday to fill the void. Like there are some people that, generally just believe, that no, this is what it takes to get this job done. And they don't really realize that a lot of what they're doing that they perceive as real value-added work actually is not value-added. So my point in saying all that is that, like, again, using Jack's example, it would be the paralegal that it's like, Jack sends him over the document into Homofont and they're like, I just don't like the way that font looks. We're going to have to change this whole thing, change the pagination, get this thing in Times New Roman. That's a much higher quality shareholder agreement. If the font is in Times New Roman and the pagination is not at the default 5 spaces, but in fact at 4.
You're sounding like a designer now, man.
So my point in saying that is if you're just teasing yourself, I'm like, we're gonna make it up in efficiency. You will not make it up in efficiency unless you actually do something to be more efficient, or alternatively, that you have additional capacity and you're prepared to actually do something about it.
And I think a caveat to that is investment in technology too. So I've seen where, you have more efficiencies and you're able to, it's kind of the best of all worlds from an owner's perspective, which is put more on someone's plate, maybe give them a little bit more money, but give them additional tools where they don't have to. And I'll give you an example, the evolution of doing timesheets in our law firm, which is on paper, scribbling some stuff down. Some people were dictating them. And so software was developed over the course of time with voice recognition. And then it is linked directly into our billing management system, where it is, my assistant doesn't do my timesheets anymore. I dictate them with voice recognition directly into our system. She spell checks them and everything else, but way past me putting hieroglyphics for shorthand, her typing it up, printing it out, me making changes, her making additional changes and then it being good to go in the system. So, but that has, and we've seen it free her up to do other things, in addition to annual increases in compensation and those kind of things. So I think there's that component too. I'm a nerd when it comes to technology and always looking for a better way of doing things, but a cost efficient way of doing things, not just because you want the next new shiny thing that looks like it's going to be fun to use.
So here's a cool little thing for you. Have you seen the Remarkable tablet? Check into this because it will do character recognition and move it into a PDF, and you can. It's amazing. I'm still playing with it, but it's really amazing. So anyway, and you can set things up. So I'm taking notes based on the Cornell method. It's pretty cool. So we'll have to talk offline about that.
Yeah, my wife and my accounting people, depending if I pay for that personally or charges the firm, very much appreciate the expense that you just created for one of them, because that looks really cool.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to talk, man. This has been a fun, like there's a lot of fun stuff going on in the chat. So Papa Joe, he says, you kids need to pay more so I can get all my money back from Social Security. Yeah. And George Santos will head up the Social Security Committee. Oh, that's pretty funny. All right. So next one, upgrading technology is not always a productivity improvement. Woo. I've watched many companies go through upgrades only to find the initial cost to productivity is greater because of the misunderstanding of the time cost implementation.
Oh, you forgot the best cost that's out there, Tom, which is called the I'm not doing that, therefore let me do the workaround.
Right.
Which I also like to call passive aggressive resistance.
Not that we have any experience with that.
That's the gift that keeps on giving. I gave up caffeine today, Gary, so maybe that's the issue.
You did?
Yeah. So.
Oh man. Well, you are going, man. You given up beer 3 years ago. Yep. Now it's caffeine. Just don't give up water.
And I gotta be alive.
Caffeine has a 3-day lag that you start feeling really good after 3 days, but man, it's a rough passageway.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. I've got 4 questions on the workforce because I want some interactivity. You guys have been giving us great interactivity, by the way. But I'm launching this poll. 4 questions. What's your company's talent situation? I really want to know from the audience. So we are at 21 people on right now. So if you would, just pick your answer. Still looking for qualified talent, cooling our heels, preparing to thin our ranks, already laying off people. The second one is, what's your company's in the office policy? 100% remote, 100% in the office, hybrid. How difficult has it been to find new qualified talent? Extremely tough, meh, easy. We're like clover to honeybees. I want to talk to you guys if you're in that category. And how difficult has it been to retain your best talent? Much harder than pre-pandemic times, hard, meh. They're easy, they're paying us to stay. Oh, I want to talk to you too if you're if anybody's in that one. So please vote away and make this interesting. Nobody's they're paying us to stay. Yeah.
Did you have to pay a royalty to use the word meh?
I should. I've got a good friend that's Jewish and they like using that a lot. So I just like, okay. And I actually have some Jewish heritage, so I figured I can just kind of grandfather into that. Tom, you're killing me, man. As said in the movie Airplane, it's a bad day to give up cocaine.
Oh boy.
Oh man. All right. So this is pretty interesting. Everybody's still looking for talent, or a lot of them. Some are starting to cool. We're hearing a little bit of that. The big banks, and if you're in mortgage, you've already been laying off people like there's no tomorrow. In office policy, look at that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish the results right now. You guys see that? Pretty interesting. The hybrid thing, I think, is here to stay, man. And even the commercial real estate guys that I've been talking to, they're seeing that trend as well. New qualified talent. One person said it's easy. I would love to know in the chat what your industry is in, because we're having a tough time, man. There are plenty of people that will apply. That doesn't mean that they have any of the appropriate skill sets. That's tough. Retaining, that was part of what we wanted to talk about today too, is like, all right, what are some of the things that we can be doing to retain? And I think we need, I would love some best practices if somebody's willing to throw in the Q&A or in the chat some creative stuff that you guys have been doing. Adam, I think it'd be worth kind of reiterating what we've been finding, what we heard from the recruitment classes on 100% remote versus hybrid, and how we're trying to be purposeful in that hybrid, because we weren't all that purposeful on the front end, and it was kind of meh. But
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so in our specific scenario, so you hear things like, Disney, you're coming back 4 days, because there's no creativity or training or stuff like that that occurs at home. And we generally agree with that. And what, because you don't have the ability to pop into somebody's office and say, hey, got a question for you. Teams just doesn't work for that. So what the new hires are looking for that we've heard at recruiting events is someone to get, hold their hands, train them, teach them, just like they're learning in college. Like, in other words, if you had the ability to teach somebody a new skill set over Zoom, wouldn't they be doing more of that, in college? But they're not. So it's just not, it's not really a possibility to take a new person and make them really good at the craft in today's age, over Zoom or over Teams. So the route that we went was, let's, you got to be in the office intentionally to help the new guy, and that's all of our responsibility, not just like one person's responsibility. It's all of our responsibility to do that. So, we brought everybody back in. It came out to be 2 days a week, but we the way that we backed into it is that, part of it is, an all company meeting. Even pre-pandemic, people had all company meetings live for a reason. Company training live because, pre-pandemic, people had company training live for a reason. Departmental training, which, live for a reason. And then each department has their own kind of dedicated workday together, which is hey, this is our opportunity to kind of help the new people out, make sure they're not stuck on stuff, and just get some synergies going. So that's what we did from an intentionality standpoint. I mean, honestly, I've had this conversation with a lot of other CEOs and peer groups in terms of like, well, just put the hammer down and tell her, because I mean, every C-suite gut level feeling is, probably people should be back in the office, but there's just a disconnect between that and, people getting work done. So in terms of what Adam currently believes is that, there's a certain group of people that just are not cut out to work from home, period. That has nothing to do with the job. That has everything to do with they're just they're shining it. Hey, wow, there's a a project to be done around the house, or there's a whatever, or I'm, suddenly life is so difficult and unmanageable that I can't possibly come to the office, even though I managed just fine for, 10 years prior. So that's one group, that's a minority. There's a vast middle section that actually is very responsible and, can work from home, but at the same time, they need to be in the office to help train new people and interact with their peers. And then there probably is a class that could permanently work remote, because they've always been, self-starters, self-motivators, whatever. It's just the problem that we're running into specifically at BGW is that, sure, could we tomorrow walk in and say, put down, everybody's back in the office? We could, and we'd have a little bit of turnover right out of the gate. That's not the fearful thing. The fearful thing is, 1 month later, when the recruiting calls are all starting saying, really, you have to be in the office every day? Jeez, come over here. So we're just still bumping up against, until everybody does it, you have to at least be competitive from a policy perspective as everybody else that you're competing against. Like, we just don't have the luxury of we're not competing against, like, did I take a job with this really cool company that does widgets versus this really cool company that does bowling balls, and I could really be attracted to either one, but remote work policy trumps, because bowling ball and widgets aren't really going after the exact same talent pool. It's like a big, broader talent pool. Whereas if you're going after accountants, you're going after accountants, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Public accounting, it's the same talent pool. So I am in a knife fight with the accounting firm right next door. And my benefit package, which includes my work environment, is part of that knife fight, and it's ugly, personal, and in your face.
Well, Joe nailed it. He said company culture is the best retention tool. I agree with that. Number of ways to develop your culture. Agree with that too. That's actually for, I think we could do a whole thing on that one. It might be worth doing. I just posted a survey link to everybody here. If you would click that link when we're done, it's like a two question survey, but what are we not covering that you'd like to have us cover in these things? And we'll probably post those things a little bit more regularly. Thanks to Rachel Coftry, who did that for us. Couple interesting thoughts. So Robert Mayetta says 401k profit sharing offering has worked for 2 of his clients to help with retention. And then Tom says several of my clients have produced videos of their company and employees and posted them on their websites. They've received positive feedback from applicants. This seems to set them apart from other companies by showing more about being employed by that company. I just heard the same thing. That's why our website has real people, our people, and kind of who we are. That's who we are. We are not mahogany and brass and stuffy, that's for sure. But I was talking with Jenny Buchholz of Haven Creative down in Waxhaw, and that was one thing that they've found too, that even their social media posting is very authentic, and they're kind of irreverent and pretty fun, but that is who they are, and they are attracting people that fit that. So I think that is one of the other things, like, be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else while you're doing it. And the other thing that I would say is, as we're kind of moving up towards the end of the hour, get in among the troops. If you're leading a company, have some heart-to-heart one-on-ones with people, because communication is always the #1 issue in every company. Always. And by the way, communication firms, I think, are the worst, and I've run a number of them. It's like the cobbler's children have no shoes. But you just, if you think that you're doing it really well, probably not as much. You can still do better. Eric says flexible scheduling is also positive for current and potential employees. We have found that to be true too, Eric. You know, hire adults, treat them like adults, give them adult goals, and let them go. You know, let them do what they need to do. And so we were doing that. Not to say that we're God's gift to accounting. We're not necessarily, and we haven't figured it all out, but we provided a lot of flexibility pre-COVID that our peers just didn't do.
So Gary, a couple of adjunct or supplemental comments to a couple things. I totally agree that culture is key. I look at it that there are two key components to hiring someone or to a company, and that is meaning retention, and that is compensation and culture. And those, I think, are, you know, when the compensation isn't as wonderful as a competitor, then you need something else to supplement and bolster that. And it is the culture. And you can pretend that you have a great culture, but as far as and bringing kind of some of these concepts together, there has to be communication. There are companies, clients that are afraid to, or have basically put their hands up in the air in exasperation and said, there's no point in going to our office manager or going to the CEO because it's just, there's just no reactivity. It's just because it's a waste of time to do that. And in some cases, when there's transitions of management, you see, okay, maybe this is an opportunity to do something different, whether it's like in a CPA firm, a law firm, or anything else. You had also mentioned in kind of bolstering the comment about communication. Interestingly, I found an article that I wanted to share some things because it is very pertinent to, I think, how my generation, Adam's generation, and older kind of think, and kind of dealing with retention and acquisition of employees that are younger than us, and focusing on the communication aspect of it. So the introduction is, when we sit down, and this is an article that they sit down with C-suite executives, and this goes for any owners. So it just happened to be that this is what the focus was of this study. We often find they're set up for an era that died years ago. They know it, but don't know what to do about it. The stakes are that it poses a clear and present danger to their culture, productivity, and future success. Poor communication leads to shoddy execution, employee distrust, and most notably lack of alignment. Almost every leader at every company spends most of their time communicating, yet no one teaches you how to do it efficiently, effectively, and profitably. And then they give 4 pointers to do that. Have a communicator at your right side. If you are not a natural born communicator with authentic, and the person should have authentic expertise, your head of communications or marketing is as vital to you as your COO or your CFO. Hire people fluent in modern communications. You need to know how to message on different platforms and with outside and within a few cozy relationships with reporters or others are useless. Rethink your style. Chances are that you talk and write too long, too fancily. I mean, lawyers are never guilty of that. Too foggily. You need to be, yes, you need to be smarter, briefer, and more real. Talk to my family about that. And I've said this before, that they have to get me out of lawyer mode, like on weekends, and just say, Dad, just talk to us in normal English, please. All right. And then listen. It is essential ingredient of better communications that allows you to communicate more transparently and more authentically, because you know what words, phrases, and ideas land with your audience and which ones flop. This means more conversations with more people at more levels, essentially creating your own personal focus group. And I just want to reiterate, trust is important, and lead by example. We were talking about the work from home concept. I see companies where they have their people And we have this issue too. So falling on my sword a little bit, where you have the expectation that staff is going to be here. They need to be in their seats. They need to be doing what they need to be doing here, and they're not as efficient from home. But yet you have some professionals, attorneys that are not walking the walk. They're just talking the talk and not leading by example. And we focused on the detriment that occurs when you don't have a more senior person there mentoring a younger person, but really don't necessarily focus on the detriment that not having, for example, me here in my office, being able to guide a staff person and the delays that are caused by having to communicate via Teams. And I mean, I was a proponent. I was like, this is awesome. Work from home, Teams, and it works for the most part, but it's just not as efficient. And so, you know, think about those kind of things. But really, I think that something that we haven't really talked about is leading by example. And my son, we were running late for a gathering, and I was driving a little more than the speed limit on 485 headed towards Concord. And I looked back, and I had actually both kids in the car at that time. And I said, you are not ever allowed to do this. And so my son, I just appropriately says, monkey see, monkey do. And I'm like, oh, and then he said, don't do as I do as I say. I'm like, okay, so here it is from my teenagers coming from the back. And then actually, just as a side note, I got caught by my father on Life 360 speeding, and I started, my kids were in the car. I was sweating. I was going to their house. It's like, Jack, you can slow down. We'll be here when you get here. And I had it on Bluetooth, so the entire family heard it. And I'm just like, oh my God, I just got talked down as a 50-year-old from my, 78-year-old dad in front of my teenage kids. That's a wonderful example. So again, leading by example, and that's all I'll say.
Oh, I love that honesty. Yeah. Welcome to the human race, baby. So I think we may have the makings of a topic for next week. And I just wrote down culture, compensation, and communication. That could be an interesting one. So, and Joe says, hey, don't need a gift card for that idea. Well, that's all right, because we're working hard to make sure that you get all of your Social Security money. So it's worth more than that $25 gift card. So anyway, thank you guys so much for taking the time to be with us today. And again, Bruce, it was so good to meet you in person yesterday at the Best Year Ever event that we put on at our offices. That was a lot of good thing. Yeah, lead by example. That either adds to or subtracts from the culture. That's for sure. Oh, Tom has asked for a copy of that professionally produced graphic that Adam put up.
I just erased it. So Gary, can I talk you into doing like a screen grab when we post this, since you're the wizard?
That is a possibility.
Stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would say is, Tom, go to the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on today. And because we'll have it posted up, and then just do a screen grab when pause it when it comes up, because it's up there for a while. That's probably the fastest way for you.
Oh, that reminds me. Can I do a promo for the Shoemaker YouTube channel? So I'm very fortunate to have our marketing person who put our prior ones in categories. And obviously the ones like on PPP and forgiveness, which are, moot at this point, are not in there. But the series that we've done on, M&As and things like that are in there. And you can should be able to easily access it on my website on my bio once they put that in there. But I think it is, if you miss something or you see something that was referenced in one, says, last week we talked about this, it's easy for you to go back to a prior one. So now you have multiple ways to access and criticize the three of us.
That's awesome.
Oh, it's funny, Jack. I'll send this to you on my tablet. I had it convert my handwriting. And today was 1/12/2023 webinar, Adan Jack. So didn't see my M's right. And the 700 billion difference. So didn't see my L's right. Still has something to be desired. Maybe it's my handwriting. So anyway.
There is no
All
chance that that device will ever be able to interpret my writing. So talk about technological inefficiencies. So maybe I'm not going to buy that because, to the comment that was made that sometimes you go in the reverse order and go backwards. That would be
Right.
the case for me.
Fortunately, you can undo and I can go back to my handwriting. All right, guys, we're going to put this up. You guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on week 143.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good day.
All right.